All right, so play page Lamed Vav here. Probably we should read the top because it's a little bit spacey out here. So it's this concept of yishritzu, of swarming. The water should swarm with the nefesh of living things, kolomar. And then he says Yud K. He says Yud K is pashat dehira ador bedor. So the light spreads from one to the next. Kula is rachashur bezim nechada. So all of it is vibrating at one time. I use the word vibrating. You correct me if I need to. Mayim mikan mayim. So he says mayim tavim. There's good water here. Mayim bishan. Then there's also bad water. Now where does water come from? Begin the Amr Yishritzu because it has the concept of a sheretz, which a sheretz is something that's tameh. So they have to swarm. Iskalalu do bedo, and they wind up being incorporated one into the next. Chaya ilah, so there's some concept of a chaya ilah, chaya teton, another chaya that's up above, chaya tava, chaya bisha. So those are the words. Let's read the Pirush and the Rav. He says, Kasiv b'Torah, Kasiv Kasiv b'Torah, v'yomer Elokim yishritzu ramayim sheretz nefesh chaya. So you have these words. It's sheretz, it's the nefesh, and it's a chaya. So he says, Pirush v'yomer Elokim ku ma'atzel elyon. So this is the major movement in the direction from up above. Yishritzu hamayim. So he says the water has to swarm. Kolomer hamayim shall yichud elyon yishritzu. So he says now, okay, he says the upper water, the water of the upper yichud should swarm. So he says maybe you like the word yashpiu better. Will give flow to the, will flow downwards. Sheretz nefesh chaya. Then he brings in the word. So he says yishritzu sheretz nefesh chaya. So what do these words mean? Behind the shefa chiyus, that is the shefa of life force, the kitzonias olamos to the kitzonias olamos. And I forgot to mention that he says this is a chapter heading called shefa kitzonias olamos, the shefa of the outsides of the world. So what does he mean? Kolomar. Kein seder hamshacha shefa hanizka. So this is the order of how things flow. He said the names Yud and K, the words Yud and K are Yak, Abba ve'ima, shehem sod osias yak, shel shem havaya. So they refer to the name Havaya. Mis yachadech besod zivug Abba ve'ima. They come together in a zivug. That's the zivug of Abba ve'ima. The Chitzonia Solomos. Now we've talked about the Soni Solomos in other places, so that's what it is. So he says Abba ve'ima the Chitzonia Solomos. Vaz is pashat nehira de da b'da. So what happens is in mispashet in their yichud haor shall os yud shu abba besoch os hey shehi ima into the hey which is ima. Kula is rachashun bizim nechada. So all of them, I use the word vibrating. Ubapam achas misrachashim ba'olim ba'alechem. So they start moving or vibrating, and they start moving by themselves. They go upwards by themselves. Besod mayim nukvin, and they are every upward movement is mayim nukvin. So he says mayim nukvin biruri hamalachim shemesa, which is bringing up birurim from the malachim that died. Now, what did he say here? Here is that this is taking place in the yichud of Abba be'ima. So he says, "Shall call shlosha olamos bria yitzir v'nasiyah." So what's happening here in this yichud is bringing up nitzutzos from the lowest places. Val yadim nimshachim shefa hamayim shall yichud elyon. So from them, you see that the shefa of the water of the upper yichud besod shishritzu hamayim, that everything starts to swarm. So he means a swarm. We're just learning over here about how the hands work with Havaya, and then you have a mole and a mole de mole. I always thought that this was a concept of spread also. So mayim tavon, mayim bishan. So you have good water, bad water. V'hine elach mayim kolodim hey mayim tovim hamashpiyim ala kedusha. This is mayim tovim which pours out onto kedusha. V'hei mayim royim and nishpayim ala klipos. And then there's another set of waters that goes to the klipos. Now, we're talking about a yichud of Gitzonius. We've seen the concept of Gitzonius, of yichud of Gitzonius of Abba Be'im before. He's developing it here a bit. So what are we really talking about? He said, when we talk about the birurim for the lower worlds of Bia, neknasim bebenten hanukva besod iver v'leider l'tzorach birur. So it's a long sentence. So let's look at it. He says the birurim that are being pulled up from the klipas. Neknasim bebeten hanukva, they go into the womb of the mother. Now in this case he said nukva, but I think he's talking about Yud and K. So iver v'leider, and now she becomes impregnated and is going to give birth. L'tzorach bira v'zikoch mahasigim shenishara bechem, and the reason for this is the refinement, the purification of the parts that are pasul from this iver. So now he's talking about at this particular time iver v'leider that takes place. L'tzorach bira v'zikoch mahasigim shenishara bechem. So in other words, that there is still shmutz attached to these biwurim. So they come up in here, and now we're talking about separating them. Of a meshach yimecha iver, so during the time of gestation, for haleda mizbarna lechabesocha mayim tovim, so we understand within them there's good water there. That's the birurim. Which is actually the way to be able to build the vlad, the embryo, Shahu Shefach Kedusha, which here we're talking about, which is all pouring out Kedusha. It's the pour of Kedusha. Mayim Royim, but the thing is that there's also bad water over there, Shehem Sigech HaBiruim, which is the psul part of the Biruim, V'yotzim L'chutz Be'ez Haleda, which comes out with the birth, I guess there's some word for it, the birth matter, all the stuff that's around it, besod Dam Tome, which is Dam Tome. So if you want to know, here's a proof. The Besoch Shefach Hamayim, that in the middle, what it wants to say is that you want this is his point, that in this Mayim shall Yichud the Elyon Nechlalo Gamba Bechidas Mayim Roim. So that, let's understand. So I'm a little off on the sequence here. He said Birurim come up and they come into the womb. Now there's a Vlad in the womb, or the Vlad is created what? As a result of the Yichud. So he says that what's inside there with these berurim also have water, or there's, I'm looking for the word water. So he says, so it's also, there's bad water up there. Why? Because I would assume that because the berurim has some shmutz with them. Begin to Amar Yishritzu, because we said, look, swarming is Lashon Tuma. Shahar Amar Yishritzu, Shuhu Lashon Sheretz, Tomeh. For who remes the Lamayim Aroim is to let you know that all of this is mingling together at one time. So he says that they're all swarming together, and you see it as it comes out now of the womb, that it was there all along because it's Dam Tome. V'omar Od, and he says furthermore, Ki b'toch yichud elyon the kitzonius of halamos, because when you're looking at the upper yichud, which was talking about not the Panemius of the Halamos, but the Kitzonius of the Halamos, Nimshach Shefa V'chius the Kol Halamos, because that's what the Yichud takes, it actually produces. Now, so just to back up a minute, he said there's actually two different types of Yehudim. So this one is the one that brings this word Chius, the Kol Halamos, Atzilus, Brian, Yitzira, Asiya. So this is the part that's the Yichud of Yud and K, V'chitzonius produces chiyus. So this is also the way that the flow goes down to bia, or to abia. Is kalalu do bezod, that they wind up being incorporated one in the other. So the shefa that's going to go and designated to all of them are all one. They're all in one place. He says they're incorporated. Chaya ilo v'kol hashefa nimshach b'klalos echot b'so chedek hashefa hayored la'olam atzilos. Let me get a translation. He says all of what's poured out nimshach b'klalos, as a general rule, b'klalos echot b'so chedek hashefa, which is a part of the shefa hayored la'olam atzilos and nikra b'chaya ilo, until it pours down into olam atzilos, which is called the upper Chaya Elyoina. V'achar kach nishar ba'olam ha'atzilus chelik ha'shefa sheshayach la'olam ha'atzilus. So then everything, so what he's saying is everything pours into Atzilus. Some of it stays in Atzilus because that's the part that really refers to Atzilus. So he says then Chayatito, then there's another life force. The Yored Shefa Sharach Shlosha Olamos the Olam Abriya. So now you have a bundle of the other the other Shefa. It's all going into Olam Abriya, Hanikra Chayatito, which is called the lower Chay. Also life force again. Ki Olam Abriya who Tachton Leumas Olam Atzilus. So this is the other. So Atzilus is the top one, Briya is the lower one. Shehu Elyon Mimeno, it's up above it. Va'acher came Nishar B'Olam Abriya. So then you have the same process that remains in Olam Abriya. Chelak Hashefa Sheshayich L'Olam Abriya. So he says Chaya Tova. Then you have a good Chaya. B'Yor the Shefa Shel Shnei Olamos and Yisharim L'Olam Yitzira. So what belonged to Bria stayed in Bria, and now they're moving down into Yitzira. Hanikra Chaya Tova. So this is called the good Chaya. Va'acher Kach Nishar B'Olam Yitzira. And then afterwards, it remains in Olam HaYetzira. Chelak HaShefa Sheshayich L'Olam Yetzira. Once again, we're pairing off of that Shefa that's supposed to go from this Yichud, the Chitzonius that came from the Yichud, the Chitzoni of Abba Ve'ima, Chaya Bisha. Then there's a Chaya Bisha. All the leftovers fall into our world. V'yored HaShefa HaNeshach L'Olam HaChasiya, HaNikra Chaya Ra, which is Ve'esmir, Lefi Shehu Olam Sherovo Ra. V'klipas. Okay, that was that idea, and now we see how the flow coming from the Kitzonius of the Lomos goes. So now we're going to a Kavanas Hatfila Karoi. So now we're coming into trying to understand how to be miskavein, and he said V'davar Acher, Pirish Acher al Pasuk Yishritzu Hamayim. So now we're talking about the swarming water again. Sheretz Nefesh Chaya, then he has the word Sheretz, which is, we understand, a swarming bug of some sort of creature. Nefesh Chaya, the Nefesh of life. So let's say Vahu al pi Targum Apasuk, so you can understand this. The word Yerachashu, which is swarming in Aramaic, Maya Rochish Nafsha Chaisa. So I still was using that word. So he says Maya, the water, Rachish, it's swarming, Nafsha Chaisa, with living chayus. What does that mean? Or living life force. So what this is talking about is us when we're coming to pray. So he says Yerchashim, yeah. It's a lashon movement or shaking. So I use the word vibrating. So his kolomar. Vavse, I guess he says Vavse Pisgamatzalusa. The Haino Kashim is no agim sfasav, when your lips begin to move, because actually the vibration goes through your lips. He says sfasa the hotse mepiv divrei afila, that comes out when you're saying prayer. Ubakasha, ubakasha, amasha amar maya, and where it says over here that it's water. Huki inyan mayam amanakim of Antaharim. This is the water that cleanses and purifies. Excuse me. Besachusa rabenikius daita rabemayim. The Haindesha Adam is palabas bezakos, is able to clear his mind. Ubenikayim adas, and his mind is clean, clear. And also the water we talk about that cleans the hands. That idea of vibrating the nefesh of the living of the life force. This is the way a person is supposed to pray. That's the words he's using again. Who rochesh, he vibrates or he causes to move. Omanane, and move, or what is the word, wave, or what's the right kind of get the right word here, as bechinas nefesh chaya. So he causes this to vibrate, this nefesh chaya. Ha'alyona shehi hamalchus, which coming from up above, which is coming from the malchus of olam atzilus. Kihu ma'alam mayim nukvim ala malchus, because what the person is doing, as his lips are vibrating, are moving, he says this is actually causing mayim nukvim, and it's going up to Malchus. And I guess that's the time we have for today. And that's this year. Yeshua Koach to you. We want to solve a couple of things here. Okay.